This is my Grandad Bill. He was a rifleman in World War II, and that conflict took him to Norway, Iceland, France, Belgium and the Netherlands with B Company in the 49th West Riding Division, Hallamshire Battalion. He fought in a place called Fontenay and in Tessel Wood. And until January of this year, which is 2025, that's pretty much all we knew. But this year, his daughter, my mum, and I, we decided that we wanted to learn more. And completely coincidentally at this time, we were contacted by the grandson of Grandad Bill's battalion chaplain. This is Tom Thorne. His grandfather was Padre Thomas of the Hallamshires and the 4th Lincolnshires. And the deal was sealed really when I showed Tom this photo of my granddad, and he showed me this one of his. It's the same car, it's the same NCOs, one hell of a coincidence. Now, Tom is an expert when it comes to the Hallamshire Battalion, and he's been continuing his grandfather's work and has spent much of his life tracing the history of the soldiers who were lost during the war to make sure that their stories are recorded and kept alive. So, thanks to him, we now have a wealth of knowledge about Grandad Bill and can even trace his entire journey step by step from the docks of England to the beaches of Normandy, right through Belgium and up into Nijmegen in the Netherlands, where his war story ended. We're not going that far today, we're going to focus on Normandy. And we've got several great sources for Grandad's journey. First is the Hallamshire's War Diary itself. It's a record kept daily by Grandad's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke, and his adjutants. According to the War Diary, Grandad was very active, particularly in the Netherlands when he was promoted to lieutenant. There's also this, from Normandy to Arnhem, a story of the infantry, which was written after the war by Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke himself. And it's a fascinating insight into the psychology of having to lead hundreds of young men into terrible danger. So we have a picture here of Grandad when he was a sergeant, just before embarking to France. His lieutenant, Chris Summers, is sitting right next to him, and his memoirs are another key primary source, and Grandad's mentioned here too. Then there's the letters written by Major David Lockwood to his wife Mary. Major David Lockwood was the CEO of B Company. And there's less of the fear and the horror of war here. These letters are more about the moments between the patrols and the battles. It's all about the beauty of the French countryside, the joys of a hot shower and a comfy pile of clean hay to sleep on, that sort of thing. And most of the above, and much more besides, can be found in Polar Bears from Sheffield by Don Scott. Mr. Scott, he spent many years collecting diaries, conducting interviews and sourcing memoirs from the veterans of the Hallams, and it's really a vital read for anyone interested in the 49th Division. Similarly, there's The Bear and the Fox, Ready for the Fray by Frederick Jean. He's very sadly passed away, but his book provides incredible insights, not only from the British, but also the German perspectives too. So, armed with this knowledge, and what with 2025 being the 80th anniversary of VE Day, my family and I decided to sail over to France and trace Grandad's journey from Gold Beach on the Normandy coast through all the villages he stayed in and the battlefields he fought on until we reached Tessel Wood. This phase of Grandad's war was called Operation Martlet, part of Operation Epsom to capture Caen. And there's so much information about B Company that we can literally go road by road, field by field where we went. So that's what we're going to do. First, of course, a little bit about my granddad. He was born in 1918 to Francis and Honora Gallagher in Batley, an industrial mill town in the north of England, in Yorkshire. He was one of 8 siblings, half of whom were already grown up, married, and emigrated to Canada. There's very nearly 10 of them, but tragically, his mother and the twins she was pregnant with all died when she slipped off a table as she was cleaning the house. And by all accounts, my great-granddad was never the same since and unfortunately turned to alcohol. So my great-aunt Agnes left school at the age of 14 to work in the mills and bring in money to support the 3 youngest boys. Grandad Bill was a very keen footballer, and there's a family rumour that he was slated to play for Sheffield Wednesdays before the war broke out. He was very close to his cousin Jimmy Gallagher, and they went to school together, and we think they joined the army together. So Grandad, he started out as a private, and then he was promoted to corporal in Iceland, then to sergeant, then to sergeant major in Normandy, was then given a field commission in the Netherlands and promoted to second lieutenant, and he finished his military career as first lieutenant when he was posted back to England and into the Durham Light Infantry. So the Hallams, despite being a territorial battalion, would end up seeing action in 6 countries. You've got Norway, Iceland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and some in Germany. Grandad's never got a victory march through Arnhem in the Netherlands. His fight ended just north of Nijmegen on the island, as it's called, sort of an area of flatland between the two cities, near Wigan and Arnhem. By January 1945, he was suffering with shell shock and was withdrawn back to England, placed in the 14th Battalion, Durham Light Infantry, which was a training and a convalescent unit. He also spent some time in Hollymore Psychiatric Hospital on the ironically named Tessel Lane in Birmingham, and you'll see the irony of that later in the video. Now, Grandad was just one soldier of millions who fought in World War II. B Company was just one unit of thousands upon thousands, but if you have an interest in the Hallams, or have a family member who was in the 49th Division, or who was involved in the Normandy invasion, maybe you're unable to visit the battlefields of France yourself, then I hope that this video is helpful and offers you a window into their experiences, just as it has for me. So stay tuned, and I'll see you on the beaches. Yeah. So we made it to Normandy, and we're going to start right at the top on the beaches. Okay, so here we are at Versailles. We've made it. This is where the Hallamshires would have landed on the 10th of June, so that's D-Day +4. This area had been cleared by the 50th Division, Tyne and Tees. Trevor Hart-Dyke was the first off the ship. He thought it was going to be a lot shallower than it was, and ended up right up into his middle, so the commander got soaked right away. And Padre Thomas had a bet with the division chaplains that he would be the first cleric onto French soil, so he was very eager to get to the front. Once the Hallamshires had assembled, they marched up towards Rouqueville, which is where we're going next, and spent their first night in French countryside on French soil. The battle was still very much raging quite far inland. The 50th Division was still fighting after 4 days of solid battle, really, from the beaches right up into the countryside. So it would be another few days before the Hallamshires took over from the 50th Division in line. So yes, we're heading to Rouqueville next, and yeah, we'll see you there. While we were passing, we decided that we wanted to visit the new war memorial to the Allied soldiers who lost their lives in the invasion, not just on D-Day, but through the entire Normandy campaign. It's an absolutely beautiful spot. They've done a wonderful job, and if you're in the area, you have to visit. It's stunning. We found Private Martin Coyne. He is a Hallam as well. He was commemorated here, and also Jimmy Gallagher and David Lockwood, so we'll be seeing more of them later. There's also these signs from the 50th Division, which are still looked after to this day. So now we're here in Rouqueville, which is where the Hallams spent their first night on French soil. So they'd come in from Versailles all the way down through Crépon and Crouly, and eventually made it here. This is where Trevor Hart-Dyke set up his battalion HQ in this sort of beautiful chateau enclosed farmyard here. And they were here for the next 3 days, from the 10th to the 13th, living off eggs, mainly eggs and milk, which was in abundance here. In fact, the Germans had put in an order for 3,000 eggs, but when they left, when they abandoned the town, that order was no longer needed, so they were sold to the British troops instead. And this is where David Lockwood started writing a lot of his letters home, and where there was a lot of sunbathing going on. There was it was quite relaxing apparently. The war still felt quite far away by all accounts. You could hear sort of bombing going off in the distance, but they weren't in the line yet. This is where they were waiting before they could get into line and take over from the 50th Division. So our next stop is through Ducy Sainte Marguerite, which we'll end up returning to, but we're going down now to the Chateau Audrieux. So behind me now is the Chateau Audrieux. The Hallam's made their way here on the 14th, and A and D companies had pushed through to take the village. There hadn't been much opposition, but Lieutenant Frank Tett, who was an incredibly popular officer, was unfortunately killed and became the first Hallam's casualty. The reconnaissance platoon found the bodies of 14 Canadian soldiers with the Winnipeg rifles, tied up and shot through the head towards the back of the chateau, and they were buried by Padre Thomas, and that became an inquiry at the Nuremberg trials. In fact, the 12th SS were using this area as a headquarters for interrogation and execution. The commander of the 12th SS who set up his base here was Kurt Meyer, and he'd already committed several atrocities at this point. B Company spent the night in a walled garden, in sort of the farm garden behind the chateau, among the fallen bodies and the stink of dead animals that were all bloated up in the sun. So it wasn't a comfortable night. A and D companies made a push to the south once Audrieux was taken, and unfortunately the Canadian attaché, Lieutenant Noisseau, was killed, and he'd just discovered a few days earlier that his wife had just had twins, so a real tragedy really. There's a lovely memorial to the Canadians who lost their lives here just outside the chateau, and there's also this huge picture on the wall of the Hallamshires as they made their way through Audrieux and onto our next stop. So we're here now at Le Haut Audrieux, this farm complex here. This was where the Hallam's spent the days between the 16th and the 24th of June planning their attack on Fontenay. They had tried on the 17th a day assault where they lay in the cornfield waiting for the signal to go, and fortunately it was called off. The 50th Division had tried a similar thing a few days earlier, and by the time the Hallam's got there, they were lying among the bodies of some of the unfortunate victims of that battle, and Trevor Hart Dyke called it a forlorn hope. Fortunately it was called off at the last minute. And around this time, the 1/6th Duke of Wellingtons moved up among the Hallamshires, having faced really stiff resistance in the Parc de Boulogne, where they had tried to take that chateau there, and eventually the 24th Lancers and the 7th Duke of Wellingtons managed to take that area, which meant that the start line for Fontenay was clear, and the attack on the 25th could go ahead. So yeah, kind of a special place to be really. Just thinking that this is where Major Lockwood wrote his very last letters, just in that building right behind me there. It's quite sobering really. Our last stop before Fontenay is a collection of farm buildings just down the road known as La Haute Vente. Okay, so here we are at La Haute Vente. This is the assembly area for the Hallamshire Battalion before they moved on to the start line down towards Fontenay. So they would have had their last meals before the attack, their last cigarettes, and they'll have tucked their hand towels, their white towels, into the pack that they were carrying so that they could identify one another in the darkness. And in order to get to the start line, they'd have held onto one another's rifles in a big long line, all done as quietly as possible. The artillery hadn't opened up yet, so they're trying to move as stealthily as possible in the night, and soon it would be very foggy. I mean, right now it's a beautiful day, it's 11 o'clock, but at the time, it would have been about 3:15 in the morning, heavy fog was just about to settle, so it would have been very dark and difficult to see, but lovely little spot. And yeah, this is the last point before the forming up point. All right, we're here. This is the forming up point on the 25th of June 2025, and exactly 81 years to the day, this would have been where the Hallamshire Battalion started their attack on Fontenay, just behind me there. It would be 4:15 in the morning when the attack started, and all the men would have come to this point that had been led there by the platoon commanders. In our case, actually, because the platoon commander, Lieutenant Chris Summers, he was out in that cornfield, laying down, well, helping the intelligence officer Jerry Bedward lay down the axis tape. So it probably was Grandad, actually, Grandad who got B Company, or his platoon in B Company, 11th platoon, into position, and then they'd all be right here, right on this spot, and they'd all lie down silently and wait for the artillery barrage. And yeah, there was a colossal artillery barrage, the creeping barrage, or the close support barrage, screaming shells overhead and smashing just 100 yards ahead of them. And then they'd all get up, and then they'd walk 100 yards, and then another barrage would fly, and it must have been terrifying. I mean, they were trained for it. They did a lot of training for this in Scotland, but it wasn't helped by the fact that a thick fog had sort of shrouded the whole area at this point, and the plan sort of went to pieces a little bit as they're all advancing down the hill. I mean, you can see Fontenay behind me there, that water tower, which wasn't there at the time, but that water tower marks where Fontenay is. It's in a little dip, so they were expecting to have a better view of it, even though it was just the early morning light, but it was foggy, thick fog, so they had to use their compasses, and loads of troops got lost and ended up in all different platoons, entirely different battalions. Sometimes some of the Hallamshires ended up with the 4th Links. The 4th Lincolnshires were just there on the right flank, and the Scots Fusiliers were on the left, with the Sherwood Yeomanry at yon side towards the Parc de Bolland, Boisland, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. In fact, Lieutenant Summers writes in his diary that at one point, as he was dashing backwards and forwards trying to get his platoon to stay together, he ended up completely alone in the field. He couldn't see anyone around him, and I just think that must have been absolutely terrifying. You're out here in this field, there's explosions going on a few yards ahead of you. You can't see anything because of the mist, and you're completely alone. It's just bizarre. It was a very unorthodox attack, especially because Hart Dyke got lost himself and pushed on way ahead of his rifle companies, and ended up in a field just down there, just ahead of the water tower, and had to wait for his rifle companies to catch up. So yeah, everything sort of went a bit wrong because of the fog. But when the fog cleared, it would have been a day pretty much like today, actually, overcast and warm, as they made their way down this field, this gentle slope down to Fontenay. Now you can see how, if they tried this during the daytime, it would have been an absolute disaster, as the 50th Division had tried at one point, and the Hallamshires were about to do the same. It's just so open, and without the cover of darkness, yeah, as Trevor Hart Dyke put it, it would have had a similar effect as that of the Somme. So yes, the dawn raid was definitely a better option. But yeah, very special place to be, right here, the forming up point. There's no white tape here today anymore, of course, to mark where the start line is, but yeah, it's a special place, and there's larks singing. Very peaceful place now. Would have been quite different Would have been quite different 81 years ago. Where I'm standing right now is the brand new memorial to the 49th Division of the 8th Armoured, which was put up just last year in 2024 to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the battle. And there's quite a famous shot here, which was taken by Sergeant Ginger, who was recording the aftermath of the battle in 1944, where there was a Sherman from B Squadron of the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, which had been knocked out literally just across the road from where I am now. And further down, where there would have been more houses, but they're all too badly damaged to be reconstructed, was Panther 217, Heinz Schroeder's Panther. This area saw a lot of action right here. There was an anti-tank gun which was knocked out further up the road there, and yeah, it's really quite strange to be standing here. Yeah, I just wanted to capture this little section. It's not really on the B Company route, but it's an interesting spot nonetheless.
There's a cavalry cross just on this section of crossroads here, and you can still see the damage caused during the battle.
Just behind me is a stretch of road where Grandad would have crossed to meet up with Trevor Hart-Dyke, who'd set up his forward command post in the field just over there. And they were actually fired upon by a tank, possibly Tank 217, the Panther that was destroyed further down the road.
This is one of the very few original houses that survived on this stretch of road and can be seen in Sergeant Ginger's film. As I told you in an earlier letter, having you there just made all the difference to my life and changed it from being a mere existence to a colourful, happy time with someone always to look forward to. I do feel that this is such a good sign for the future for us and our young family, and I do feel we've got so many happy years before us.
Where I'm standing now is just forward of the command post that Lieutenant Colonel Hart-Dyke set up. And Lieutenant Summers writes in his diary that he and my Grandad were sent forward into the mist to try and find any enemy positions. They didn't find any, but they did find Captain Mike Lonsdale Cooper and Jock Jackson, and nearly actually shot each other in the fog. But they made it back to the forward HQ, where Lieutenant Colonel Hart-Dyke told Major David Lockwood to take what men he had and make a push towards Objective Queen, which is the bridge just down the hill from here. Unfortunately, as they got into this field, Major Lockwood was killed by a German soldier who was in either a house where that water tower is now, it's been knocked down unfortunately, and also perhaps the house just beside it there. So at that point, Captain Bill Ashby and Private South, who was David Lockwood's Batman, they run forward. Bill Ashby throws a grenade, but it bounces awkwardly against the house, and Private South is wounded. But they consolidated that position. The German who'd shot Major Lockwood had already fled, so they didn't find him. But at that point, Bill Ashby ordered Lieutenant Summers, with my Grandad, to go and push onto the bridge objective at Objective Queen.
This footage from the battle itself shows Scots Fusiliers in the sector just beside the Hallams going into a ruined building which had been destroyed by artillery, looking for German positions and a place to set up their Bren gun. And here a Hallamshire soldier brings water to an injured German soldier. These are Hallamshire troops moving through Fontenay, taking up position towards Tessel Wood, which would be their next objective. This is a ruined house which had been completely destroyed by artillery, and this is the ruined house today, completely rebuilt, and they even left the pine cone ornament on the gatepost, which is a really lovely touch. And that's that same view down the road today.
This is Objective Queen here. It's a small stone bridge across the stream, one of two bridges across the stream in the town, so it's quite important to capture these. And Lieutenant Summers and Grandad would have been here waiting for orders to push on to the Thiers-Juvigny road further up, and then D Company came to relieve them of this position and could consolidate around here.
This is some footage of a Hallamshire soldier walking through the B Company sector, and this is the exact same spot today. That's 81 years later to the day, and here's the same soldier checking for snipers in the opposite direction, and this is where he was checking. This is the same place. Less houses here, of course, because they were so destroyed by artillery. And here's a view of the church, and here's the same view today. More trees, and now there's a basketball court.
We're now by the church, and in this field is where Chris Summers and Grandad, they sheltered in bomb craters while they waited further instructions. And eventually they went and pushed up through some of the farm buildings over to the, what would be through to do a right flank of any enemy positions that were down this road.
This collection of buildings here was actually the Hallam's first HQ in Fontenay, but unfortunately it was hit by artillery and set on fire, so they had to move a bit further north. These are the farm buildings that Grandad would have come through with B Company and Chris Summers until he reached this orchard here.
This field just behind me used to be an orchard, and it was in this orchard that my granddad's friend, and friend for life, Lance Corporal Joe Penn, was saving, he saved 32 lives as a stretcher bearer. And it was actually through this field as well that Chris Summers led what was left of B Company through to do the right flank manoeuvre. And they were under heavy fire and had to do the pepper pot manoeuvre, covering fire, and then the next person stands up and over they go until they reach the hedges over there. Unfortunately, when they got to yon side of these hedges, the creeping barrage, the close support barrage that was supposed to be down to help the coilies with their attack on Tessel Wood, miscalculated and hit directly on them. And the coilies and a lot of the Hallamshires lost a lot of casualties just because of this miscalculation. Lieutenant Summers survived. Unfortunately, Private Hanson, his Batman, was shot by a machine gunner, and he didn't make it, unfortunately. But there was a possibility that Grandad would have met up with Joe Penn at this point, because Lieutenant Summers called for a stretcher bearer to help Private Hanson. So yeah, there's a lot of machine gun fire in this field, a lot of mortars. And in fact, this is the field where B Company at the end of the battle dug in for the night. So it was a bit of a wet and rainy evening for the liberators of Fontenay. They got to celebrate by sitting in a muddy trench being sniped at and mortared. So yeah, a lot of casualties in this field. And now it's another beautiful cornfield, and it was an orchard. So yeah, things have definitely changed. It's a very peaceful place now. Behind me is the building that was used as a field hospital, sort of as a rest area really, by the stretcher bearers as they brought in the casualties from the orchard. Chris Summers came here looking for the stretcher bearers to find someone to bring Hanson out of danger. While he was here, bearing in mind Lieutenant Summers hadn't eaten anything for 20 hours, so he had a packet of sweets here and sort of chatted to the people that were tending to the wounded, and he bumped into Ivor Slater, the commander of A Company, who was looking for some of his troops, and a lot of A Company were in here. A Company did get really quite badly, were down quite a large amount of their strength due to the fire coming from the field behind me, and a lot of B Company was here as well. 12th platoon, which was Oliver George Watson Jones, the remnants of his platoon, a lot of them were here. Lieutenant Watson Jones himself had been killed charging through an orchard just down the road here. So yeah, this was sort of where a lot of the wounded were being taken care of. And in fact, in the barn just behind me, as Lieutenant Summers was going to rejoin his men, because he'd left Grandad and the rest of them in a ditch in the field just over there, and he noticed a tank pull up on the road where you are now, and through the windows of the barn just over there, and he took a few shots at the Germans there, and he may have hit a couple of them, because there was an Hallam's anti-tank gun just behind you, and they said that they saw a few of the Germans being shot from the farm just behind. So, well, this is where several graves of Germans were. Well, I think they've been reburied since then, but the wall just to the right of me now had 3 graves of the German soldiers that were shot from the barn just behind me there. And really, this is sort of the conclusion of the Fontenay tour, really. From this point, B Company dug in back in that orchard that we showed you earlier, and spent the rest of the night being shelled and mortared and sniped at in the rain. So, a bit of a dismal end to what was militarily a successful day, but a lot of friends lost, a lot of people killed on both sides, a lot of young men lost their lives right here. And yeah, that was the Battle of Fontenay, the 25th of June 1944. I'm now standing in front of Tessel Wood. This is where the Hallamshires would have spent the 27th of June all the way to the 16th of July as part of, well, sort of the end phase for them of Operation Martlet. There were really 2 objectives for them being in this wood. One was that there was ideally going to be a push towards the Roré Spur, which is an area of highland which is a great place to situate artillery. But secondly, because Operation Martlet was part of the much larger Operation Epsom, they wanted to tie up as many German units as possible in this area so that they would not be available to support the assault on Caen. So the Hallamshires, in many respects, drew the short straw really, and had to be in these woods for 3 weeks, being shelled several times every day. There were snipers everywhere. They lost a lot of soldiers here in these woods, which is twice as big as they are now. Half of it's been cut off and is now an agricultural field. So yeah, this is where Grandad's cousin lost his life, Lance Corporal Jimmy Gallagher. He was killed in a mortar strike, and yeah, it was, you kind of feel that every unit in World War II had a place that was sort of the most difficult to cope with, you know, their real sort of baptism of fire, really. And Tessel Wood, as far as I can gather, was the Hallamshires. I mean, they were on the island in Nijmegen as well, which was very rough, but I think this was the first time they had to deal with the sort of intensity of the shelling and just the daily casualties mounting up and up and up. And in fact, by the end of their 3 weeks in Tessel Wood, since Fontenay, they lost over half their strength. There was just over 800 of them when they went to Fontenay, and by the time they left Tessel Wood, they'd lost 460 of their number, either through wounded or through being killed. So yeah, this was quite a rough spot. In fact, it's the place that I know most from the stories that Mum's told me, because this is the one place that Grandad would talk about, Tessel Wood, and it's really weird to be here now because I've grown up with stories of this little wood. So yeah, very strange to be here. There's a few sort of notable dates. On the 27th, which is today, actually. Today is the 27th. So I suppose on the anniversary of had been recently promoted Major Bill Ashby, who'd taken over from David Lockwood of B Company. he was shot in the spine just going down the road, which is behind you as we speak. And tomorrow on the 28th, Jimmy Gallagher would be killed by a mortar strike, and Bill Palmer would be killed, and Captain Phil Young, who used to be the second in command of B Company before he was made the sniper officer and joined the HQ company. Yeah, a mortar barrage killed them all, and nearly killed Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke as well. He got some shrapnel wounds in the arm from that strike, so it was pretty devastating. This is sort of one of the first times that the psychological effects of the war were starting to creep in, really. There was what they call bomb happiness, we'd call it, maybe shell shock now, but quite a few Hallams were pulled out because of shell shock. In fact, there's a story that Chris Summers writes about where someone actually just starts screaming and just runs up the road. So yeah, just being mortared every single day, explosions going off, you never know when they're going to go off. You can't leave your position, you can't even go to the bathroom because there's going to be machine gunners in the hedgerows. You're surrounded here. They pretty much were surrounded on three sides during their stay here. On the 2nd of July, D Company makes a push south, down towards Vond, which is the village just south of here. But the patrol didn't go particularly well. Several were killed and several were captured as well. On the 13th, there's a bit of good news. Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke presented Sergeant Williams with the £5 bounty for being the first anti-tank crew to destroy a German Panther in the division. In fact, Sergeant Williams was wounded when he pulled up a second anti-tank gun in Fontenay and destroyed the German Panther. So he actually won a military medal for that action. On the 15th, Lieutenant Bernard Kesby, who just joined the Hallamshires the day before to be Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke's adjutant, he mistook an order, and instead of phoning B Company to relay an order by Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke, he ran across the field just behind these woods and was hit by a mortar. And I think Lieutenant Hart Dyke took that pretty hard because he writes in his book that was he couldn't believe that just a simple miscommunication could get a man killed just that easily, which I think was really, really tragic that such accidents could take place. On the 16th, so the last day of being in Tessel Wood, it was decided that they should make a push towards Vond and Barbie Farm, and Major Derek Dunnell with the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry were attached to B Company to be commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Hart Dyke for the assault. So there was a bit of a scary moment when all the battalions the battalion had to reorganise to get the Coilies and B Company to the front so they could go down the hill and attack Barbie Farm, and they were getting mortared and sniped at this point. In fact, Chris Summers writes that himself and Major Mike Lonsdale Cooper, who'd taken over B Company after Bill Ashby had been shot, that as they're trying to manoeuvre into position, they get hit by several mortars and just have time to leap into their trenches just in time before they get killed. So it was quite a frantic maneuver to get to the start line before they had begun the attack of Barbie Farm, which will be our next stop. This is Barbie Farm behind me now. It's kind of the last stop for the Hallamshires in Operation Martlet. On the 16th of July, the Coilies and Hallam's B Company made their way towards this farm, which was, all of this would have been orchards at the time. It's mainly fields now, but the Coilies were up ahead. They managed to take the farm and were holding it against the Germans that were attacking them from all sides with machine guns and mortars. And you can see there's still quite a lot of agricultural activity going on in this area, but well, at the time it would have been a battlefield. And when B Company tried to advance to help the Coilies, the forward platoon, which was possibly 12th platoon, was almost completely wiped out by German machine guns, And you'll be able to see from this position, if you've got some machine guns around here, you've got a fantastic view of the hillside where Tessel Wood, well, the lower part of Tessel Wood would have been. So it really is a very difficult advance. There's barely any hedgerow cover whatsoever. You've got the cornfield, and that's it. When they got here to support the Coilies, they found that the Coilies had lost quite a lot of their troops, and so they sort of did their best to hold the farm for as long as possible, but they couldn't really push out. And eventually there was I suppose a retreat was called. They didn't want to call it a retreat. In fact, Mike Lonsdale Cooper, according to Trevor Hart Dyke's recollections, got really, really upset and said, "But sir, the Hallam's never retreat." And Derek Dunnell of the Coilies, he ordered the Coilies to walk back up the hill because he didn't want the Germans to think that they were retreating, because that's just not what you do in the 49th Division. You don't retreat. As it turned out, the attack worked, and the Germans vacated the area the same day. They just didn't want to have to deal with an assault like that again. So it worked. Vond was cleared, but at the cost of a lot of lives, particularly on the retreat back up the hill. In fact, it was at this point that Padre Thomas jumped into the half track and was just ferrying wounded soldiers back and forth under heavy fire, with bullets ricocheting off the armor of his half track, and the stretcher bearers jumping out and collecting the wounded to take them back. Heroics, real genuine heroics at this spot. So yeah, this is as far south as the Hallams came. From now on, they're going back up for a week of rest and training at Ducy Sainte Marguerite, and then around Caen, up through Belgium. They've got Le Havre to take first, of course. They've got over 1,000 Germans to capture and a submarine to capture as well. It was a hugely successful attack on Le Havre. Then up through Belgium, the Battle of Poppel on the Dutch and Belgian border, and then up towards the island between Arnhem and Nijmegen, where they'd be stuck for all winter, and then eventually they would be they'd walk through Arnhem as the victors of the war. So it was there's still a lot of fighting to go, even after all this, after a month of hell, really, for the Hallams.
There's still a lot of battle damage that can be seen at Barbet Farm and throughout the village of Vond, just down the road. Strange to think that one of these bullet holes might have been made by Grandad. So
that's it. That's Operation Martlet, and that's everywhere in this region that Grandad went. So yeah, it's been a tough one at times, but it's been great to keep the memory of the polar bear alive, really. So that was Grandad's route through Normandy, and like I said, there's still a lot of fighting yet to come. That's for another trip and another time. After the war in the early 50s, Grandad and his family moved to Canada, but they returned to the West Riding after only a few years. Grandad worked away in London, building bank vaults, but when Mum was young, he began to work locally in and around Leeds. He had a fierce belief that a good education was the way up and out of the poverty that he'd experienced growing up, and was the driving force behind my mum going to university to study music. He was also heavily involved in social work in and around Leeds, providing support at homeless shelters and youth programs. So he was a real socialist in the purest sense of the term, both politically and through his actions. And there are all sorts of things I'd like to ask him now, but I suspect he wouldn't have told me a fraction of the things I've learned over the last year. And now I get to share this journey of his and the journey of B Company with you. And as an addendum, when we were visiting Ducy Sainte Marguerite, where the Hallams rested after Tessel Wood, we bumped into a couple of guys who were doing a similar journey to us, sort of tracing the journey, but of the Sherwood Yeomanry. And so we stood and had a chat with them, which was great. And then as we were chatting, we were joined by a French farmer. He had a truck full of sheep. And he asked us if we were the families of veterans. And it turns out that his father, in the summer of 1944, looked after British troops after Operation Martlet. So it's very possible that he will have seen or even spoken to Grandad Bill. So that's another wonderful coincidence there. Mum gave him a Hallam's flag, and he put it in his car window, which was a lovely gesture. And as he was leaving, he sort of leaned in and he said, "We must never forget." And I think that just sums up everything I've been trying to do making this video and sharing it with you all. So that's it from me, but I'll let my granddad sign us off. This is a part of the only recording that we have of him. It's taken in the mid-60s during one of his updates to his family in Canada, and I can think of no better way to conclude all of this. So with that, I'll just say goodbye, thanks for watching, and God bless.
That, I think, is just about it for this time. I will probably remember something later on that ought to have been included, but I think you'll gather from what's gone that if anything has been omitted, it is of a relatively unimportant nature, and so it leaves me only to pass on to you all, each and every one of you, the best regards and wishes of all of us over here. So with this, I'll say good night and God bless. Good night.